Hi, I'm Susanna. I'm an indie author and a freelance book formatter. I have self-published one novel, Katie, which is a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, and an urban fantasy short story, In the Shadow of Death. Both are available on Amazon, and the short story is also available on other ebook retailers. I'm currently working on a prehistoric coming-of-age story, which I'm calling Project Prehistory. I'm currently in the middle of draft 5, but today I'm actually working on a different project. Today is Wednesday, April 9th, and I'll be working on a short story. Bit of background: back in November 2023, during NaNoWriMo, I wrote 10 short stories. Now, some of them were decent, others were frankly quite bad, but a couple of them I thought were actually good. Last year, during April's Camp Nano, I edited 2 of the short stories. The other one, urban fantasy short story, became In the Shadow of Death, and that one I decided to self-publish. The other one is a literary fiction short story, and I want to try to get it published in a literary magazine. But after the first round of edits last April, it still wasn't quite finished, so I let it rest until I had time to get back to it. Which I did a couple of weeks ago. I wrote the third draft in my last writing log. So today I'm going to read the short story one more time to see that it really is finished and ready to be submitted. I'm going to write a cover letter and author bio and submitted it to 3 literary magazines. Those are my top tier literary magazines that are currently open for submissions. So let me open my document and start reading and possibly make some minor tweaks. This short story has around 4,700 words and it took me about an hour to read it. I did some minor tweaks, I changed some words and I deleted about 20 words, but now I think it's finished and ready for submission. The next thing I need to do is the cover letter. Luckily for short stories, the cover letter is not as difficult as for novels. Basically, it's 2 paragraphs where in the first paragraph I mention the title, the word count and the genre of the story. And the second paragraph is a few sentences about myself. Since my writing has never been professionally published before, I'm going to say that this will be my first publication. The literary magazines may also ask for an author bio, but I think for that I can tweak the author bio I used for Katie. So those 2 things shouldn't take too long. That was relatively easy. It took me less than half an hour. For the cover letter, I had googled examples of short story cover letters and I basically copy-pasted expressions from those and made it my own. For the author bio, I currently have 3 versions. The first is the one that I used in Katie, but I think that's a bit too whimsical in style to be used in a more serious literary fiction short story. So I made 2 other versions that are slightly shorter. I have to double check the magazines to see what kind of author bios people have previously used before I decide which one I'm going to use myself. But before I do that, I'm going to take a little break. Okay, I'm ready to submit the first one. On to the next one. double and triple checking everything. Let's submit the second one. One more to go. I just made the third submission as well, so now we just have to wait for several months. One of the magazines said that it might take up to 11 months. Two of the magazines used Submittable, which was quite easy to learn and understand, and the third magazine had their own submission system, which wasn't difficult either. So the submission systems were really easy to use. Most of my time went to double checking and triple checking that everything was correct and I didn't have any typos. So now that that's done, all I can do is wait. Also, these cookies are really delicious. Good morning, it's Tuesday, April 15th, and today I'll be working on Project Prehistory. But before that, there's something else I want to talk about. About a month ago, I entered a writing contest. I showed that in my previous writing log. That was the Writer's Sanctuary first page contest, and 2 days ago I received my feedback. What made me excited to enter this contest was not so much the prospect of possibly winning it, because I thought that I probably would not. But what I was excited about was that everyone who entered the contest receives feedback from their first page. The entry fee was $25, which is not a huge amount of money, but honestly I would not have entered the competition if I hadn't gotten something in return. So it's really nice that they gave us feedback. In order to enter the competition, you had to pay the $25 and send your first page double spaced. My entry was 343 words, which is not a huge chunk of text, but it's also the most important 300 words, and I wanted to make sure that they are as polished as possible before I start querying. So let me tell you a little bit about the feedback I got. So in the feedback, they first give you a contest scoring sheet where they score 8 different aspects and give each aspect 2, 4, 6, 8 or 10 points, which means that the minimum score is 16 and maximum score is 80 points. I scored quite a lot of 8s and a couple of 6s and I think 1 10. The aspects that are scored in the scoring sheet are the page's opening, main characters, story/plot, pacing, grammar, voice, the setting, and overall response. For the opening, I scored 6 points. The page of this book intrigued me sufficiently to continue reading. For the main characters, I got 8 points. The main characters of this page possessed an interesting personality and clear motivation. Also for the story/plot, I got 8 points. The storyline of this page was interesting and easy to follow. For the pacing, I got 6 points. There were a few instances where I felt the story moved either too slowly or too quickly. I presume they thought that my pacing was a bit too slow because some of my beta readers have commented on that as well. But I wish they would have given me a little bit of written feedback as well, in addition to the numerical scoring. For grammar, I got 8 points. I was momentarily pulled out of the story once or twice by a spelling or grammar error. I'm quite happy with the score because I'm not a native English speaker, so if there's only 1 or 2 spelling or grammar errors, that's great. Although I do wonder if one of the spelling errors they got is something that I've done intentionally. There's one instance where I capitalized the word sun, but that's purely intentional because sun is a goddess in this world. Unfortunately, there really isn't a way for me to explain that in the first paragraph without it being really info-dumpy. So I'm hoping that when I do query it, agents will be able to look past that and not be stumped by what seems to be a spelling error. For voice, I also got 8 points. The writing on this page was well done. I enjoyed the word usage. For the setting, I got full 10 points. I gained a vivid understanding of the setting where the scene unfolded. It was vivid and rich in intriguing details. And for the overall response, I got 6 points. I found much of this page enjoyable. So my total score was 60 points out of 80. They have not yet announced the semi-finalists, but I presume that with that score I am not going to be one of them. In addition to the score sheet, I also got a few sentences of written feedback. So there are 2 questions. First is, what specific advice for improvement can you share with the author? And I got 2 pieces of advice. The first is related to the main character's name, because I do not reveal the main character's name until the end of chapter 1. Several other readers have also commented on this and wondered what the main character's name is, but there are reasons why I don't reveal it sooner. The main reason is that this book is set in a matriarchal society where men are not important. So it's sort of like in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, where the main character is called Offred and we do not learn her real name at all. There are a few hints in the book that her name probably is June, but it's never explicitly stated. So similarly in my book, men's names are not important and the main character's name is not mentioned until he finally meets the first woman who treats him kindly. So that's something that I do not want to change. The second piece of advice, however, was really important. Give the opening a stronger hook that pulls us in immediately and then end on a bigger emotional beat. Now I do have a bigger emotional beat, but that happens on page 2. So one of the ideas I'm toying with currently is that I might condense the beginning of the story a little bit. That would make the pacing faster and it would also move the emotional beat sooner. I'm also thinking that I might change some of the sentences which would make the stakes clearer. The second question on this score sheet was, what did you love most about this writing sample? Here's what the feedback says. Really enjoyed the strong imagery and descriptions. Beautiful. Also, the emotional subtext, distinct personalities and character interactions were very well done. This warms my heart because I really love my characters and it's great to hear that other people do too. The other thing is that I'm always amazed when people love my descriptions. Descriptions are something that I really struggle with. I usually don't even bother with them in first draft. And then in second and subsequent drafts, I spend a lot of time honing my descriptions. Sometimes it might take me 30 minutes or even an hour working on just one sentence of description. So it's awesome that all that hard work has paid off. So I received some great feedback and at some point I have to go back to the beginning of chapter 1 and tweak it. But I will not do that today. When I started editing draft 5, my goal was to edit 2 chapters a week. But after a few weeks I realized that my editing is going faster than I expected. So I actually changed my schedule and now my goal is to edit 3 chapters a week. That's been going really great as well. This week I'm already on chapter 20. That means that I should be done with the first pass of draft 5 by the end of May or in early June. During the first pass I make all the changes I want to make. And after that I do a second pass and see if there are still some things I want to tweak. The second pass is much faster, so I should be done with that by the end of June. That means that in July and August I can work on my query package. I also want to get my query package critiqued, probably in August or September. And after that I still want to read the manuscript one more time. Technically I could start querying this year, but there's so many things I need to learn that I don't want to rush the process. So I'm gonna take my time, learn as much as I can and start querying in January. But before we get to that point, I obviously need to finish draft 5. I read chapter 20 yesterday and today my goal is to edit chapter 20 and read chapter 21. In the evening I will start editing chapter 21 and I will continue editing it on Wednesday and Thursday. On Friday I will read chapter 22 and on Saturday I will edit that chapter. And next Monday I will read chapter 23 and so on, and that will be 3 chapters edited every week. But let me pull up my document and start editing. I just finished editing chapter 20. This is one of my favorite chapters. It's where my two main characters finally meet, so it's sort of like a meet cute, but since this is not a romance, they only meet at the midpoint. Anyway, they've now met and their lives are irrevocably changed whether they know it or not. It only took me about 2.5 hours to edit this chapter, which is what I was talking about when I said that my editing is going really fast. So let me move on to reading chapter 21. Morning, it's Tuesday, April 22nd, and today I'll be working on chapter 23 of Project Prehistory. I read the chapter last night and there aren't very many things to fix, so I should be able to finish editing this chapter in just a few hours. The reason why I want to read the chapter before I start editing them is first I want to reacquaint myself with the chapter and what's going on, and secondly there's always some small things that I notice when I read the chapter. Like last night, I noticed that I used the word steam and steaming quite close to each other. That's not a big issue, but I try to avoid repetition whenever possible, so the first thing I'll be doing today is to try to find a synonym for steam. Now, if someone could explain to me why Microsoft Word thinks that the word partridge, the bird, should be spelled with an hyphen, that would be nice. I just finished editing chapter 23. It took me 2 hours and 45 minutes, but I did take a short lunch break. Next I'm moving on to chapter 24 and read it so I can start editing it in the evening. One good thing that happened actually already last week is that my word count is now under 138,000. If I can get it closer to 137,000, that would be awesome. The book is still quite long for querying, but at least I'm making the text shorter rather than longer. I just finished chapter 24, that took me a little under an hour, and now I have time for a different project. So let's move to the living room. 2 weeks ago, as you saw earlier in this vlog, I sent a short story to literary magazines. And now that that's out of my hands, I want to start editing a different short story that I also wrote in November 2023. This is a cozy fantasy short story. There is a short battle scene, but since no one dies, I think that still counts as cozy. I have not touched this project since November 2023, so I have no idea how much work it needs. So I'm going to start by reading it. It's only 12 pages, so it shouldn't take me too long. I had forgotten how funny that story was. There were several places where I was basically laughing out loud. It was a little weird reading that story because it takes place in the winter and we're obviously heading towards spring and summer. But I think it would be good if I can work on that story during the next couple of months and hopefully send it to literary magazines in the fall. But before I can send it out, the story needs a lot of work. The battle scene I mentioned, it's really short. I definitely need to beef it up. Also, the main character doesn't have a name, the villain doesn't have a name, and there are a lot of details I still need to add. There are also a lot of repetition that I need to get rid of. So there are things that I need to add, things that I need to delete, and things that I need to change. But I'm hoping that I can do 2 or 3 rounds of edits during the spring and summer. So I'll be working on this project alongside Project Prehistory. Finishing draft 5 of Project Prehistory is obviously my main priority, but I'm hoping that this will be a fun side project. Anyway, I think I'll end the vlog here. Let me know in the comments what you're working on, and I'll see you in my next video.